Welcome back to an audience of one by JannahVersity, in which we deliver spiritually uplifting and motivational content to individuals who need a reminder that they have worth, that they have value, and that they have a gift that they need to share with the world once they recognize their full potential. And that regardless of how many mistakes you've made, that it's never too late to make today the day that you change your life. This has been a long process. You think about better days, and sometimes it feels like it was only yesterday. But when you stop and think about it, you realize that your fall from grace, if you ever were there in the first place, it's actually a long time ago. Sure, you may ask yourself if you ever were a great person or if you ever were doing well. Maybe you weren't and the facade just broke at some point. But regardless, at some point you let things spiral out of control to the point where even if you were maintaining a facade of having it all together, even that fell apart. So you're at where you're at now and you're making improvements, you're moving in the right direction, but it's still hard because you've come to realize how far down the rabbit hole you've fallen. And when you take a moment to evaluate and reflect on everything, you start to see the magnitude of the mistakes and the transgressions that you've made. I mean, just look at your physical self. You've fallen apart physically. Your fitness routine is shaky to non-existent. Your diet is completely unhealthy. Just like the rest of your development, you gave up on yourself. So each day, each transgression became, what's a little bit more? Now you're overweight, so what's one more coffee or one more dessert or one more bag of Doritos? You've skipped one workout, so what's skipping another gonna hurt? An unhealthy meal here or there turns into an unhealthy diet, and a missed workout here or there turns into abandoning exercise altogether. You've left off so much of what you've wanted to be. You've engaged in all sorts of detrimental activity. You've consumed things that were harmful to your body, harmful to your mind, and harmful to your emotional and spiritual well-being. You did things that you regret. You said things that you regret. You watched and witnessed things that you regret. And there's a lot of things that you failed to do that you wish you had done. And throughout this process, because you feel as if you failed yourself, you've spent years reaffirming those feelings by telling yourself how much of a failure you are. This negative self-talk only enabled your multiple-year escapade of self-harm. It would be one thing if you lived in a vacuum, but you didn't. So it would be nice if the only casualty to the battles that you fought were yourself, but as you look around the wasteland of what had become your life, and you start to realize that you left a body count in your wake. Yes, we've been avoiding this talk for some time, but you knew it was coming. You've been asleep at the wheel. And that's the nicest way we can put it. Might be better off to say that you were drunk behind the wheel and you ran over a good number of people while you were at it. Now, there's no need to list the names of all the people or the transgressions. I'm sure you can think long and hard and probably come up with a list of people, places, and events with some very vivid memories that you'd prefer were nightmares rather than memories of actual events. So you've got to recognize the hurt twice caused. The hurt you've caused yourself and the hurt you've caused to others. Now, with regards to the hurt that you've caused yourself, well, as hard as it is to hear, you've got to forgive yourself. We addressed this in episode 3 when we talked about the need to forgive yourself. And as much as you'd like to believe that you did, you know that you haven't. You haven't quite conquered that mountain yet. So it's a benefit for you to hear that one more time. Look, you did what you did, and you didn't do what you didn't do. There's no hiding from that. Someone can cover their own faults, but it's hard to pretend you weren't witness to your own crime scene. So sometimes there's demons you can't run from, and you've got to face them head on. But your job now isn't to dwell on these things, it's to make amends. It might sound simple, but sometimes it can be easier to make amends with other people. You can apologize, explain yourself, you can grovel, but asking yourself for forgiveness feels like cheating. Maybe it's the self-deprecating part of you. You don't want to give yourself that concession, but you have to, and there's multiple reasons why. You don't want to hear it, but we all make mistakes. We all screw up, we all transgress. I'm not talking about mistakes. I mean, we all do things we shouldn't do, and we do it knowingly. That doesn't excuse you from your actions, but many of us fall victim to despair because of the comparisons we make of ourselves to others for whom we don't know the extent of their dirty laundry. And the goal isn't to compare ourselves to others. Not so that we can feel good about how our failures aren't as bad as theirs, or so that we can feel bad because we feel that our failures are worse than theirs. The idea is that you just have to get into your head that failure happens. It's a part of life. It happens to the best of us. In fact, what makes the best of us, not that they're perfect people, but they're people who've been able to survive their failures and learn and grow from those failures. And the best of us are those who are able to take those lessons and be in service of others. Which brings us to the next point. The purpose of recognizing your transgressions is not to allow them to consume you, as you've let them do in the past, but to be able to make amends for them And you can't correct a problem or seek forgiveness for transgressions that you don't acknowledge exist. And because it feels ingenuous to seek forgiveness from yourself, the best way in which you can do so is not by making an apology to yourself, but through correcting your situation and improving it beyond whatever height you had ever climbed previously. Now, with regards to the hurt that you've caused others, there are 4 categories you're going to have to address. The first, for those of us who believe, you're going to have to make amends with God. And for the most part, regardless of your specific ideology, nearly all of us believe that the ability of God to forgive is beyond your capacity to transgress, meaning that so long as you're still breathing, there's forgiveness for those who seek it. Obviously, you need to feel genuine remorse, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But your next step is to commit to stopping those transgressions, and then you need to follow up that evil with good, which is all we've been talking about. It's time to change your life around and recommit to improving every aspect of your life. The next category are people you've hurt who you can seek amends from, but you shouldn't. This is because for whatever reason, you're seeking forgiveness from these individuals will only cause additional harm. This is usually only in extremely rare situations, and sometimes because they're unaware of the transgressions, and making them aware of it now will only make matters worse. Now, this doesn't mean you avoid seeking forgiveness for any transgression just because it's going to make things uncomfortable. But sometimes what people don't know won't hurt them, and you should keep it that way. The best you can do is just try to correct your situation. Now, the third category of people are the people you've hurt, who are people you can seek amends from, and you should. Now, again, this doesn't mean it's going to be fun. Just because you might cause some drama and you might have to take some heat doesn't mean you should run from that responsibility. The heat you're going to take is most definitely warranted. And you may need to listen to some people vent and talk about how your actions or inactions affected them. This is a hard thing to do, but one of the reasons it's important is because you hold all of that negative energy of regret for many of these actions, and you need to let all of that go. Now, one great way to help that process is to seek forgiveness from those who are affected. Now, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either they're going to forgive you or they're not. And if they forgive you, that's going to go a long way to help you feel like you can forgive yourself. If they don't, well, that's something you can't control. And you can't concern yourself with things that you can't control. You've done your best. They want to hold on to whatever it was. You've just got to move on. If there's going to be any settling of the score at this point, then just let God take care of it. Now, the last group of people are those who unfortunately are dead. And there's nothing you can do there except correct your affairs and amass as many good deeds on their behalf, and then let God sort that out in the end. Regardless, you got to do your part, then you got to move on. And the most important reason is you have to recognize the hurt Thrice caused. And that third hurt hasn't been because of what you've done to yourself or what you've done to other people, but the hurt you've caused everybody in the world by being selfish with your life and not giving them the best version of yourself. It's hard to think of whatever you've been through as being selfish, but it is what it is. And that's because you have to ask yourself, have you been the father that your children deserve? Have you been the husband that your wife deserves? Have you been the friend that your friends deserve? Or that the type of people you want to have as friends deserve? And then on a whole other level, your community and the society around you, have you been the person that they deserve? If you could give each of those people the gift of the best version of you that could exist, what does that look like? And why aren't you putting every ounce of your energy into becoming that person? Because the way you've acted over the years has been selfish, and that it's been filled with a whole lot of self-loathing and self-harm. In fact, this entire experience has been one big experiment of self-harm where you've allowed yourself to get into your feelings at the expense of who you're supposed to be for God, and who you're supposed to be for you, and who you're supposed to be for your spouse, and who you're supposed to be for your children, and who you're supposed to be for your community, and who you're supposed to be for the world. We need that version of you. And if you need a little slap in the face to wake you up, so be it. But recognize the harm that you've caused yourself, that you've caused other people through your actions, and the harm that you've caused everyone by withholding from them the gift of who you have the potential to be. And you have to make amends for those past wrongs. And while you're going to be able to seek forgiveness from some, while others you're not, the best way that you can right the wrongs of the past is by writing the future in a way that blesses all of us with the present of your presence in a form which exemplifies the most beautiful character, motivated to bring the gifts that you have to share with the world. Use whatever remorse that you have inside of your heart for the harm Thrice caused as motivation and fuel to deliver it to the rest of us.